Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed right here on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Tuesday afternoon, we have Shawn, Cruz, Manager of Trader Services at TD Ameritrade, for an update on the Nasdaq-100, trends that we're seeing in VOLQ. We'll take a look at the semis and also have a preview of ADBE earnings. Shawn, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks, and let's take a look at Nasdaq-100 levels.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting right now, and I guess the good news is that the 100-day moving average was able to hold in sort of that last major pullback we had from some of the all-time highs. And when we see those longer-term moving averages hold, then we can sort of flip back and take a look at some of the shorter-term averages. And so right now, if you look at the 20 and 50-day moving averages, we're sort of stuck right in the middle of both of those, and it looks like we can maybe start keeping an eye on these averages to see if we can break out, because I think markets right now, when you do sort of have these larger pullbacks, you want to watch those longer term type of averages, but then you can start to flip back and look at the shorter term to see if there's going to be some sort of a breakout and a recovery back up towards those highs. If we're looking at specific price levels that I'm also looking at on top of that, I would say right around 13,300 and 13,320 on the upside looks like an interesting resistance level. But if we do maybe pull back and start breaking down again, you can probably start looking anywhere around that 12,800, 12,850 level, somewhere in there is where I would maybe look to see some sort of resistance kick in. I think it is going to be interesting to watch, though, is we're sort of in this very choppy sideways motion, and so we're starting to look and just see, what is going on with that. When can we maybe expect some sort of a recovery and a snap back to trending higher as we get into the rest of the year and hopefully get to more of a reopened state? I think you need just broad-based broad-based participation in that regard. And when you look at it today, you're generally seeing it more or less mixed, but the semiconductors are certainly have a difficult go of things today. And I think it's interesting. This is all coming when we're starting to get a lot of analysts putting out some new price target updates, some new research notes, particularly focused on the supply and demand dynamics in the semiconductor space. I think it is going to be interesting to see if we can get semiconductors to start maybe turning around here. Because if you can get semiconductors improving, I think that can really be what causes the overall Nasdaq-100 itself, the index, to really maybe start going up, and we can start eyeing some of those previous highs that we had seen.
And Shawn, when we take a look at VOLQ, anything you can see there in terms of forward-looking volatility trends?
So I was really at a close eye on one price level for VOLQ, and that was right around 2450. That just seemed like a level when we did pull back down to that 2450 range, we would sort of bounce off that. It sort of just showed the ebb and flow of sentiment from market participants, and they never really got, I'd say, overly optimistic in that regard. But recently we have been able to now break below that 2450 level. The question will be, does this mean we're entering sort of a new volatility regime where we're going to see maybe that 2450 level become the high that we bounce off of, and maybe we can start looking at that range being between anywhere as low as around 22, anywhere as high as 2450. I think that would show a little bit of a shift in the paradigm just in terms of forward-looking expectations for volatility or just uncertainty about what's to come in the future. But certainly breaking below 2450 it was significant to me, and I'll just watch to see, one, if we can maintain these lower levels around 24, and if nothing else, continue to pull back. I think that would indicate that we are ready to resume a march higher for these big tech companies.
And finally, Shawn, let's wrap up with a preview of ADBE earnings after the close.
It's going to be interesting to look at Adobe. A lot of analysts want to see what comes out of their digital channel, the digital advertising segment. There was a little bit of uncertainty around how businesses were looking at that going into the end of fourth quarter last year. So the market may be willing to go out there and say, look, you had a weak fourth quarter, but we think things are going to look better for you in the forward-looking guidance category. So I think if they can actually guide forward and just say, look, there's a lot of uncertainty going into last year, but we feel better about how things are going to fare the rest of the year as businesses get a little bit more certainty and are a little bit more willing to spend on digital experiences. I think that is going to be really the narrative that the market's going to be more focused on. But just looking at this post earnings range, it's about $17 in either direction is what a lot of the options market is pricing in for that post earnings range. And that puts you anywhere down around 448 or 445 up to about 482 or 479, just depending on where we close today. But $17 in either direction, so a $34 range is what the market's pricing in post earnings, and it'll be interesting to see what they say, especially for that forward guidance number.
All right, Shawn, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.